Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today and speak about hope. And of course, it's quite difficult to speak after Father Roman have said almost everything, at least, the most important things. And I'm very grateful for having a chance to listen to him. But I was asked to speak about Ukrainian culture at the time of war. And I have prepared some slides, and I will tell you how Ukrainian culture is coping with the war in terms of cultural heritage and in terms of contemporary culture. So just a second, I will share my screen. Should be there. Yeah. So, Ukrainian Institute, which I represent at the moment, is the Ukrainian institution responsible for cultural diplomacy and for bridging Ukraine with other cultures, with other countries through culture. Before the war, we worked in around 28 countries, and we were working with around 200 projects by now. And we had millions of audience worldwide. But I have to say that all our effort has doubled or tripled since the 24th February. However, unfortunately, the reason is we face a huge interest in Ukrainian culture. And of course, this is a great opportunity to speak to the world and to explain the world what Ukraine is and what Ukrainian culture is. And speaking about the nature and the essence of this war, we of course have to recognize the neocolonial character of this war. And this is where we have to bring up the truth of history, not the manipulated version of history that was presented to us by President Putin on the eve of the 23rd of February. And we have to admit that that cultural sites and culture is one of the most important targets of Russians in this war. And I will be able to show this, but also we have to follow, the narratives that Russian propaganda is bringing to us, and they are bringing the de-Ukrainization of Ukraine. With this, confirming the awful and the tragic results of destroying the country and its people and its culture. Responding to the huge number of problems that Ukrainian culture is facing, we see one of the major targets in this war is cultural heritage. At this moment, we have around 400 objects of Ukrainian culture destroyed by Russian missiles all around Ukraine. To create evidence of these huge crimes, we have started a project which is called Postcards from Ukraine, where we keep the record of every cultural heritage site destroyed by Russians in this war. And to give just a few examples, the awful news about the local museum of Ivankiv, which is in Kiev region, went around the world, and everyone was speaking that more than 20 artworks of Maria Primachenko, Ukrainian famous painter, were destroyed. But luckily, we found out after the town was released, that the artworks were actually saved by the guard of the museum with his wife, who literally went into the burning museum and took off the paintings. And many paintings are already exhibited around the globe, and one of them, for example, is open in the main exhibition of the Venice Biennale this year. And the one image you can see here on the left is the recent painting, the painting that was recently sold in a charity auction for $500,000. That's, I think, is the record price for Ukrainian artist ever, I mean, living or dead. Another huge loss that we had was the destroying of the Literary Memorial Museum of Grigory Skovoroda. What is important about this case is not only that, you know, just a small memorial museum was destroyed by a huge and very expensive Russian missile, but it is the museum of a philosopher who has his 300th anniversary this year, and who is called by Russians one of the founders of Russian philosophy. So it's a very awkward type of aggression when they are destroying the cultural side and culture, not only of what they consider being enemy, but what also they steal as part of their heritage. You see here on this map a preliminary numbers of heritage loss at different regions of Ukraine. Of course, the larger numbers are at the front lines, but also in other areas of Ukraine. And as for now, I think most of Ukraine, the most of regions in Ukraine have cultural losses. It is also important to speak about the nature of this war in culture, through culture, and how it changes the art world and the cultural world. So together with the colleagues from the Ukrainian Pavilion, we launched a discussion program. It's a public program that is unfolding during the Venice Biennial this year. We have already done the first public discussion dedicated to the neocolonial essence of this war, and we explained to the international audience how this war changes the art world and how this war is at the same time global and local, how it is fought by Ukrainian people, but for the values of the European and of the civilized world in general. This year, the presentation of Ukrainian culture in Venice is unprecedented, despite of not having our own pavilion, because as you might know, Russian pavilion that was built in the beginning of 20th century on the initiative and supported and funded by Ukrainian mecenate and collector and founder of the first public museum in Ukraine, Bogdan Khanenko. This pavilion was fully occupied by Russian art for more than century. So when the Russian Empire collapsed, the Soviet Union took over the pavilion, and mostly Russian artists from the Russian part of the Soviet Union were presented. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russian Federation took the pavilion. So Ukraine does not have its own pavilion, and each time it has to find another location, another place to represent itself. And this year, even in the situation of war, we were able to present Ukraine at the Venice Biennial at the time when the Russian pavilion remained empty and silent. And we also had an extra pavilion, which was an initiative of the team of the biennial itself, and you can see it here. It's called Piazza Ukraina. It's in the center of Giardini, and it shows the ashes of the burned house. You only can see a part of the wall, basically, yeah, and ruined foundation. And at the center of it, you see the imitation of the monument covered with sandbags. The typical situation and the typical scene you can see in every Ukrainian city, from east to west, from south to north. we keep protecting our cultural heritage, and we keep our monuments protected, surrounding them with sandbags. So you can see all the heroes from all the periods of Ukrainian history, both from the imperial period, from the Soviet period, they are all protected as part of our culture and part of our heritage. Contemporary art has given a huge response to the events, and you can see here an artwork by Alevtina Kahidze. It's her drawing is now situated in the center of Vienna, in front of the museum's quarter. It's actually, there are two artworks on both sides, and the one you can see, actually, it's on this photograph, you can even see my older kid performing, because she has covered the word "me" with her head. So actually, as everyone is an artist, everyone can feel yourself between Bucha and Vienna, being in this situation like Alevtina Kahidze was, when just 5 kilometers from her home, there was a front line, and she could hear the bombings, and Bucha, with all the massacre, is just 70-minute drive from her house. And Vienna is 15-hour drive from her house. So she put herself, in the middle of these two distances. And she's, facing the massacre and the tragedy of the Ukrainian city that is associated with the worst crimes at the moment. Another example of working with the war content, let's say, the topic of war, is how Zhanna Kadyrova, another Ukrainian artist, you see, Ukrainian artists are usually having names associated ethnically not with Ukraine. Kahidze is a Georgian last name. Kadyrova is also not typical Ukrainian name, and this shows that Ukraine is a contemporary political nation, and it's not represented only by ethnic Ukrainians at all. So Palyanytsia is the topic of Zhanna Kadyrova's latest work, and she has shown it in many places. Palyanytsia is also a word that Russians cannot pronounce because of a different type of pronunciation and linguistic, peculiarities, because it's a very specific Ukrainian word, and you have to, have your mouth and your face be used to speaking like that. So Palyanytsia is literally a piece of bread. It's a festive bread. It's something that you bring out when you meet your guests, someone you welcome, and you want to share a piece of bread with them. And at the same time, it became a symbol of separating friends from enemies and understanding who is in front of you, who is speaking. This artwork has these stone breads. She used the stones from Western Ukraine, where she had to relocate when the war started in February, and she cut the stones in the shape of bread, and she then sliced it as pieces of bread, basically. This exhibition was also shown in the Venice Biennale during the opening. There is also this phenomena of art and art cultural heritage being rediscovered during the war. We all know the story of this vase, in the shape of a bird, and we all know that it was found on the ruins of the house in Borodyanka on a small kitchen cabinet, which was hanging there despite the rocket missile. And the symbol of this vase became also the symbol of capacity and a symbol of the strengths of Ukrainian people, because we're all, standing there on those cabinets like that vase. And it became super famous when Ukrainian artists gave presented the two vases to the presidents of Ukraine and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the images also went around the main the magazines and newspapers, and it also was the reason to speak about what kind of artifact is that, where this vase came from. And we discovered, that there was a huge tradition of pottery nearby Kiev. It's called Vasilyevska Keramika. That was a factory that is rooted back in the beginning of 20th century and has some connections with the avant-garde of the beginning of 20th century. And we also found out the name of the artist. And so, this discussion about art in the middle of war and about cultural heritage became somehow a very important thing. And everyone had wanted to get the vase, and one of a sudden, a thing that was actually created in a huge amount disappeared from the market. And a thing that you could buy for something like around 10 euro now costs hundreds and sometimes thousands of euros. So it's also an example of, how an artwork and or something can become a trend in a very strange situation. Yeah, it's an accidental situation, but at the same time, it gave a lot of interest and a lot of appreciation from different audiences. And now it's actually an example of a piece for collectors. Everyone wants to get one now. And this is where I want to stop. I wanted to just give, a small, a few examples on how this awful, devastating war that is aimed to destroy the country and its nation and culture gives us inspiration in arts. It both inspires contemporary artists to work with issues, with problems, creating new, very powerful and very meaningful art nowadays, and how we protect our cultural heritage, no matter to which context and to which period it belongs, even to those imperial periods that we are now reconsidering and decolonizing in our past. And at the same time, how this war opens Ukrainian culture to the world and to ourselves, because we still have the necessity to speak about art and about our cultural heritage, even at the dramatic situation and in the humanitarian crisis that we're facing ourselves at. I think that attitude towards culture is one of the replies to where Ukraine gets its strength from. Why are we so brave? Because we have this very rich cultural heritage that inspires us, that supports us, that gives us hope for the victory and for tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Tetiana, this is I don't know, it's hard to express. I'm speechless. I'm full of admiration for your creative and art community. It certainly helps us to understand how creativity is in a strange way blooming in worst conditions, which is a strength we all share together. So thank you so very, very, very much from really deep from our heart. Thank you.
And I've